I mean, a month living in India, it was crazy. Everybody, my name is Jasmine and I'm sharing a story time with you all. The time we were in the hospital for New Year's Eve in India, and let's just get straight into it. My husband was the one who was sick. It wasn't me, and that actually was scary because he never ever gets sick. And before this whole thing went down, he never got sick. So I actually thought he was faking. I thought he was exaggerating. I thought he just had like a mild cold. We had just moved to India about a month or so before this whole incident. And I was just like, it's just stress. It's just transition. And so I did brush it off for maybe even a day or so. So I would check on him and bring him soups and teas and different things like that. And it wasn't until he, one, wasn't getting up, and two, was looking visibly sick. He had a fever, like he was warmer, but with my hand, I really couldn't tell. We didn't have a thermometer at the time either. So him being like that really signaled to me that there was something wrong. And I still was like, okay, let's talk to our nurse and see what she says. Maybe it's just something light. After talking to her and going over his symptoms and checking in with her, it started getting worse during the day, and then overnight he wasn't getting better. And so, she would check in every once in a while to ask how he was doing, and the fact that he was getting worse signaled to her that we needed to go to the hospital. I then started to kind of freak out a little bit. Of course, I didn't let him see me sweat because I felt like I needed to kind of put on a brave face and be strong. Our nurse, separate from the hospital, made an appointment for a doctor to actually see my husband, and so we had an appointment. Remember this, a set time. I think it was like 11 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So I called my friend Sheikh, and he graciously offered to take us to the hospital because we didn't have a car, and I just didn't know how else we were going to get to the hospital. I didn't know what else to do. And it was one of those things too, again, where I was nervous, but I didn't really feel like he was that sick. So I just took my purse and may have taken a couple of extra things because I was like, oh, we'll be at the hospital for maybe like 3 hours max, and that's it. So we go to the hospital, and going there, obviously he's still not feeling well. He may have fallen asleep for a time. And then we get to the hospital, go into the main doors. We are looking for where we're supposed to be. And I'm kind of like holding him, kind of like navigating him to where I think we should go. Some people spoke English and some people did not, but that was enough to guide us along with the different signs. And so it did take some time, but we finally made it to the place where we were supposed to be. And once we got up to that area, it was so crowded. There were so many people that were sick, and it was so weird to me because I couldn't fathom why. And hospitals do this all the time, not just in India, but when you have a bunch of sick people in a space that is semi-enclosed and small, are people going to get sicker? Probably. So that's kind of how it felt. It was like I wasn't sick, but I probably could have gotten sick if I let it happen to me. My husband he just was feeling weaker. We luckily found a chair for him to sit in. Thought getting up there that there was in fact a line, and I realized there was no line. There was no line. Everybody was just kind of like all over the place, and it reminds me of traffic sometimes where you might have the lines in the road, but everybody is kind of all over the road. So that's kind of what the lines look like. So being about a month or so into living in India, I was not assertive. I did not have my assertive, like push to the next point mindset. And I was also worrying about my husband, who was not assertive either because he was sick. And so we kind of waited for about an hour until we finally got assistance. And it wasn't even somebody that came and talked to us. There were only 2 desks and 2 employees. And so they were trying to tend to all of the people that were around. And honestly, everybody kept cutting us. It was just so annoying. And I think that's when I started to become assertive. Like, I think that is the lesson that I learned about living abroad or doing anything, is you don't become who you need to become until you're in the situation where you need to be that thing. So I needed to be assertive because my husband was getting sicker. I was getting more nervous, and people were staring. Like, again, we were there for about an hour without being seen, and everybody was staring. There'd be new people coming into the area, and then they would just kind of stop and stare and then move on and then try to cut us. And it was a mess. Our nurse, the one that made the appointment, she called and asked, how was your appointment? And I answered the phone and I said, we haven't even seen anybody to check in. We haven't checked in yet. And so she was like, oh, that's unacceptable. Let me call my contact at the hospital to basically figure this out. So she did that, and there was somebody that came about 10 minutes later to help us out. And that was great because there was this guy that, you know, out of all of the other people that were there pushing and getting in front of us and also staring, there was one guy who decided to come and talk to my husband because he thought he was a basketball player who was sick. So he tried to make conversation, and I was like, no, not right now. My husband is sick. It's nice to meet you, but like, please just give us our space. Like, we are so overwhelmed. And I think that is honestly the theme of the whole entire time. So the person that came to assist us finally met us and escorted us, you know, to the front of the line, which was really, really nice. We felt very special, but it had been an hour and we basically missed our appointment. So this person helped us to the front of the line. We got checked in. So he escorted us to the waiting room, and we waited for about 10-15 minutes, and then we were finally able to see a doctor. So the doctor checked my husband out, did all of the preliminary things, you know, checked the throat, checked the chest, listened with the stethoscopes and all of that good stuff. And what the doctor realized is that my husband was in fact sicker than we thought he was. The doctor suggested that we stay overnight. Staying overnight wasn't something that we planned for. I mentioned I only took my purse and a few things here and there. So I immediately texted my friend and said, hey, you know, we might have to stay, so I guess if you want to wait or you can go, you know, I'll text you in about another hour and we'll see where we go from there. Made our way to another wing of the hospital, and it was actually fairly quiet for the most part. And honestly, it being quiet was nice because where we were previously was really, really loud and a little chaotic and unorganized. So it was nice to finally be somewhere where it was a little more quiet. I set my husband up in a room, and what was nice about the room is that there was this like windowsill area that it was kind of like a little bed couch situation. It wasn't comfortable, but it was something. And then he had his hospital bed. There was a bathroom, and we didn't have to share a room with anybody. So it was technically a private room, and it was right next to the desk where the nurses and the doctors, I guess, hang out. Honestly, we weren't sure if it was just gonna be overnight or a couple of days. They were kind of talking like it was gonna be a few days, and I don't know. I mean, we were just so overwhelmed at that point and uncomfortable because we had been standing and sitting and around so many people that we really just wanted to go home, but he was not doing well and he needed medical attention. We took everyone's recommendation and we just said, okay, we'll just stay at least one night. We'll just do one night, get all that we need to get for one night and see how it goes. So at this point, we didn't know anything. We didn't know what was wrong with my husband. We didn't know why we had to stay overnight. We just knew that he was sicker than a cold, and that honestly made me nervous because I was just like, we just moved here, and then my mind started racing like, is this gonna be my experience for the time that we're living here? Are we gonna be able to live here? Is he going to be too sick to stay here? I just didn't know. Started to just have a little bit of anxiety about the whole thing, but I tried to keep it cool. I got even more worried when the doctors came in and the nurses also came in, and they were starting to, you know, do their checks and tests on him and also draw blood. They had to hook him up to an IV and like some tubes and different things like that. It was a lot for me. Like the fact that one of the nurses just couldn't figure out how to get the IV to stay into his body, and I could just see him wincing. He didn't cry, but he was just like in pain. You could tell he was in pain. I couldn't take it. I almost wanted to leave the room, but I had to make sure that they were doing their jobs right, honestly. And I turned around for like a second, shed a few tears, turned back around, and then was like, okay, we're doing this. This is what we're doing. We have to make sure that he feels better. I'm getting all the feels again because it's just, I've seen loved ones when they're not well, and obviously that's not a good feeling. but I'd never seen my husband so vulnerable and in such a situation where I couldn't do anything. I'm usually the one that takes care of him when he's sick, and I couldn't do it. And so I was really just sad and just worried. So they finally drew the blood, they got the IV in, and he was finally able to rest, and he was dozing off. And what I thought about was, okay, while he's dozing off, I need to like start to take care of some things and like get ourselves situated and better and ready for an overnight stay at a hospital that isn't very comfortable. So what I did was I asked my friend to drive me back home so I can get some things and some food and some snacks and some blankets and things like that, and then bring me back to the hospital. So I did that, and I spent about like 2 hours away from my husband and then came right back to the hospital. And yeah, that is a long story, and I feel like it gets better. Like, this is just part one. Part two is going to get better, and it's actually funny. Part two has some funny bits. This one wasn't really funny. Like, it was pretty serious. So if you want to see part two, let me know by leaving a comment down below, and also give this video a thumbs up. If you want to see part two with my husband, give this video like double thumbs up, because I can try to convince him, if you all actually like this video, to be in part two so he can tell his side of the story. The way he tells it cracks me up every time. So I think that'll be great. Now that I'm done with my emotional roller coaster, I think I'm going to get off now and go look to see if I can find something to eat, because that always cures emotions, sadness, reminiscing, memories, all of that jazz.